Sylvia Peterson had never believed in fairy tales, but she had believed in Stephen Cole. For 4 years, she had stood by his side, through long nights of struggle, through whispered dreams of the future, through the sacrifices she made so he could chase his ambitions. They had met in college, two ambitious souls determined to carve their mark in the world. When Stephen landed a promising position at Hypertech Solutions, they celebrated with takeout on their tiny apartment floor, laughing about how one day they would toast with champagne in a high-rise penthouse. She had believed every word. But tonight, as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, her phone screen glowing in the darkness, she realized what a fool she had been. The image on the screen was crystal clear. Stephen at a high-profile tech gala, his arm draped around a stunning woman in a red dress, his lips dangerously close to her ear. Sylvia's fingers tightened around her phone, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She scrolled further. More pictures. Stephen, smiling at the cameras like he belonged in that world, the world they had once dreamed of together. A notification popped up. A message from her best friend, Lila. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you needed to know. He's been seeing her for months, Sylvia. I'm so sorry." Sylvia inhaled sharply. Months. She had spent the last several weeks waiting up for him, cooking dinners that went cold, excusing his late nights and unanswered texts. He had told her he was just busy, that she needed to be patient. Patient for what? For the day he would finally drop the act and leave her behind? She dropped the phone onto the table, the betrayal slicing through her chest like a blade. Everything they had built, every late-night conversation, every whispered, "I love you," it had all been a lie. She thought of the sacrifices she had made, how she had once turned down a better-paying job just so they wouldn't have to move away from his opportunity, how she had supported him when he was struggling, believing that when his time came, he would do the same for her. But no, Stephen had never intended to build a future with her. He had been waiting for a better option. Her stomach twisted in disgust. How had she been so blind? A sharp knock at the door broke through her thoughts. She wiped at her eyes before opening it. It was Stephen. Standing in the doorway in his expensive new suit, reeking of arrogance. He didn't look guilty. He looked triumphant. "Sylvia," he said smoothly, stepping inside without an invitation. "I wanted to talk." She folded her arms. "Oh, you finally have time for me?" Stephen chuckled like she had made a joke. "Come on, Syl, don't be dramatic." She narrowed her eyes. "I saw the pictures." For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not guilt, annoyance. Like she had inconvenienced him by finding out. "Sylvia," he sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You're overreacting," she scoffed. "I'm overreacting? You cheated on me, Stephen." He exhaled, exasperated. "Look, I didn't plan for this to happen, but let's be honest, Sylvia, you and I were never going to make it in the long run." The words hit her harder than she expected. Stephen shrugged. "I'm moving up in the world, Syl. The circles I run in now, they expect a certain image. And you." He gave her a once-over, his lips twisting into something cruel. "You just don't fit." Something inside Sylvia snapped. She straightened, her heart pounding, not with heartbreak, but with cold, sharp fury. "You're right, Stephen," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I don't fit into your world, because I actually have integrity." His jaw tightened. "Syl," she stepped closer, her voice steel. "Get out." For the first time, Stephen hesitated. He had expected her to cry, to beg, to fight for him. But she didn't. She was done. When he finally walked out, slamming the door behind him, Sylvia felt the weight of his betrayal settle deep in her bones. But she wouldn't let it break her. No, she would rise. And she would make damn sure that one day, Stephen Cole regretted ever underestimating her. Sylvia was no stranger to hardship. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let a man's betrayal define her. But Stephen's words, "You just don't fit," echoed in her head like a cruel reminder of how disposable he had considered her, how he had written her off as unworthy of the world he now occupied. That night, after he walked out of her life for good, Sylvia sat alone in her tiny apartment, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She had two choices: wallow in heartbreak or rise above it. She chose the latter. Sylvia threw herself into her work at Titan Corp, the country's largest and most influential conglomerate. No more waiting on love. No more wasting time on men who didn't see her worth. She worked longer hours than anyone else, volunteering for high-risk projects and taking on challenges that others avoided. She restructured financial strategies, slashed unnecessary costs, and turned failing divisions into profitable powerhouses. Her reputation grew, the sharp, relentless financial analyst who got results. But success wasn't easy. There were nights she barely slept, days when she doubted herself. Corporate sharks circled, waiting for her to fail. Senior executives tried to undermine her, whispering that she was too young, too ambitious. But Sylvia had fire in her veins. She didn't just survive, she dominated. 2 years later, Sylvia wasn't just successful, she was unstoppable. At just 29 years old, she was promoted to Chief Financial Officer of Titan Corp., the youngest in the company's history. When the news broke, the industry took notice. Every major business magazine featured her. Interviews flooded in. Investors trusted her. And Stephen? He saw her face on the cover of a magazine while sitting in the sleek, sterile offices of Hypertech Solutions. His world froze. He had assumed Sylvia would disappear into obscurity, that she would struggle without him. But no, she had become more powerful than he ever imagined. For the first time, Stephen Cole felt the sharp sting of regret. Sylvia's life transformed. Luxury penthouses, first-class flights, invitations to elite galas. Everything she once dreamed of. She attended high-profile business events where men who once ignored her now fought for her attention. But she wasn't impressed by empty words and shallow admiration. She had built this life without needing anyone. Still, despite all the success, the power, the wealth, something was missing. Late at night, when the city lights stretched endlessly beneath her penthouse window, she realized she was lonely. Her heart, once full of ambition and rage, now felt hollow. She had climbed to the top, but was there anyone beside her to share it? She didn't have an answer. Not yet. Sylvia lived life in a controlled, calculated manner. As CFO of Titan Corp., she didn't make reckless choices, didn't let emotions cloud her judgment, but all it took was one forgotten purse to throw her into unexpected chaos. It had been another long day at work. Back-to-back meetings, ruthless negotiations, and the exhausting weight of being the only woman in a room full of older, skeptical executives. By the time she left the office, her mind was clouded with numbers and projections. Stopping at a quiet cafe in downtown Manhattan, she ordered her usual, a caramel macchiato, extra shot of espresso, something to shake off the exhaustion. The moment she reached for her wallet, panic hit. Her purse. She had left it in her office. The realization sent a chill through her. She, Sylvia Peterson, the woman who managed billion-dollar transactions effortlessly, had managed to leave her own purse behind. She took a steadying breath, trying to assess the damage. No cash, no credit card. Problem? A voice asked. She turned sharply. A man stood beside her, dressed in a navy blue janitor's uniform, the Titan Corp logo stitched on the chest. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms, dusted with faint scars. His dark brown hair was slightly messy, as if he had run his fingers through it one too many times. He wasn't particularly polished, but there was something about him, a quiet confidence, an air of mischief behind those striking blue eyes. "I'm fine," she said stiffly, not appreciating being observed in her moment of weakness. He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't look fine when you froze up at the register." Her lips pressed together. Who was this man, and why was he so smug? "Look, I just left my purse at the office. I'll figure it out," she said, turning toward the door. Before she could leave, he stepped forward and handed a bill to the cashier. "Her coffee's on me." Sylvia stared at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he shrugged. "But you looked like you were about to combust from embarrassment, and it was kind of entertaining to watch." She narrowed her eyes. "So you enjoyed my misery?" "Just a little," he smirked. She huffed but took the coffee. "Fine, thank you. I'll pay you back tomorrow." His smirk widened. "I'll hold you to that, CFO." Sylvia stilled. "You know who I am?" The man chuckled. "Hard not to. Your face is in every company email. Plus, the finance department doesn't shut up about you." She frowned. "And you are." He extended a hand. "Nathaniel Nate Carter, night shift cleaner." Cleaner, of course. That explained the uniform, the slightly rough hands, the unbothered attitude. For some reason, she hadn't expected him to work at her company. "You don't look like a janitor," she muttered before she could stop herself. Nate raised a brow, amused. "And what does a janitor look like?" Sylvia hesitated. He looked different. Most of the janitorial staff at Titan Corp avoided eye contact with executives. They faded into the background, careful, distant. But Nate, he looked at her like she was just another person, not a powerful CFO, not an untouchable business mogul, just Sylvia. And for some reason, that unsettled her. Sylvia went back to her office and gave the money to her assistant to deliver to Nate. That night, when Sylvia returned to her penthouse, she couldn't shake the encounter. Why had Nate paid for her coffee? It wasn't the money. She could pay him back 1,000 times over. It was the gesture, the effortless way he had stepped in like it was second nature. She didn't meet people like that often, and she had a strange feeling. This wouldn't be the last time she saw him. The next evening, Sylvia walked into Titan Corp's gleaming headquarters with her usual air of confidence. But for the first time in years, her mind was distracted, not by financial reports or business deals, but by an unexpected encounter with a man who shouldn't have left an impression. Nathaniel Carter, a janitor. But something about him lingered in her thoughts longer than it should have. Maybe it was the way he had looked at her, not with reverence, not with intimidation, but with an ease that most people in her world never dared to show. She had been admired, envied, even feared, but rarely had she ever been treated as if she were just normal. Shaking off the distraction, she entered her office, her assistant following close behind with a stack of documents. "Miss Peterson, you have a board meeting in an hour, and Mr. Blackwood requested a review of the international investments. Oh, and..." Sylvia's sharp eyes caught sight of a crisp $20 bill sitting neatly on her desk. Her assistant followed her gaze and frowned. "Did you leave money on your desk?" Sylvia sighed. "No, but I know who did." She picked up the bill, already imagining that irritating smirk. He actually returned the money. That meant Nate had come into her office during his shift. The idea of some random janitor waltzing into the CFO's personal office would have made her furious if it were anyone else. But with Nate, she only felt unsettled. Why did he return the money? Most people would have pocketed it, or at the very least, let her buy them another coffee in return. But no, he didn't want her debt, and that bothered her more than she cared to admit. That evening, as Sylvia finished reviewing reports, she noticed the time, almost 11 p.m. Most employees had gone home, but she had gotten used to late nights. She stood, stretching slightly, and decided to take a short walk through the quiet office halls. The executive floor, usually buzzing with movement, was now eerily silent, except for the distant hum of a vacuum. Following the sound, she turned a corner and spotted him. Nate stood near the boardroom, sleeves pushed up, earbuds in, absent-mindedly wiping down a glass table. He moved with ease, unrushed and unbothered, as if he had all the time in the world. Sylvia folded her arms and leaned against the doorway. "Didn't expect to see you still here." He pulled out an earbud and glanced at her. "Didn't expect you to still be working. That makes two of us." A small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "So, did you find my little gift?" She lifted the $20 bill between her fingers. "You didn't have to return it." "Yeah, well, I don't like debts." Sylvia raised an eyebrow. "And yet, I owe you a coffee." Nate shrugged, a teasing glint in his blue eyes. "I'll survive." She should have just walked away. This conversation was unnecessary. She had billion-dollar deals to manage. What was she doing standing here, bantering with a janitor? But something about Nate made it hard to walk away. So, against her better judgment, she lingered. "You don't act like a cleaner," Sylvia said, studying him. Nate chuckled. "You've said that before. Should I be insulted?" "It's just, most janitors don't return money they don't have to. Most don't talk to executives like they're equals." Nate leaned against the table, crossing his arms. "And most executives don't talk to janitors." Sylvia stiffened. He wasn't wrong. "You ever think maybe the problem isn't me, but the world you live in?" Nate continued, his gaze unreadable. Sylvia had spent years perfecting her ability to control a conversation. But Nate Carter wasn't playing by the rules. "Maybe," she admitted. His smirk softened into something almost intrigued. "Huh," he murmured. "Didn't think you'd actually agree with me." "Don't get used to it," she said dryly. He grinned, and for a brief moment, Sylvia forgot who she was. Forgot she was a powerful CFO. Forgot that there were rules, social lines she wasn't supposed to cross. For a brief moment, she was just Sylvia. and he was just Nate. And she had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she found herself talking to him. Sylvia Peterson had built an empire of control around her life. Every decision, every step was meticulously planned. There was no room for distractions. Yet here she was, talking to a janitor after hours, night after night. It started with casual conversations, brief exchanges in the quiet corners of Titan Corp. A sarcastic remark from him, a sharp reply from her. She kept telling herself it was nothing, but it became a habit. Somewhere between working late nights and unexpected coffee shop rescues, she found herself looking forward to their encounters. And that was dangerous. One evening, Sylvia found herself in the executive lounge, sipping coffee alone. The city skyline stretched before her, a sea of glittering lights. She wasn't expecting company. "You're here again," came that familiar voice. She turned and saw Nate pushing a cleaning cart into the lounge. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly messy as always. "You say that like you're surprised," she said, arching a brow. "I'm not. You work too much," he replied, leaning against the counter. She smirked. "And you don't. Cleaning at night isn't hard work. It's just quiet. Gives me time to think." Sylvia stirred her coffee. "About what?" Nate hesitated. Then, with a half smile, he said, "You." Her breath caught. He said it so casually, as if it were the simplest truth in the world, as if it were inevitable. "You're lying," she said, trying to sound unaffected. He chuckled. "Am I?" Their eyes met, and for a moment the world outside didn't exist. No corporate hierarchy, no wealth, just two people standing in the shadows of a world that wouldn't understand. She broke the gaze first. "I should go." "Running away, CFO?" he teased. She swallowed hard. "It's late." "Yeah," he said softly. "It is." But neither of them moved. Something was happening between them. Something dangerous. Something that neither of them was ready to name. Sylvia knew better than to let emotions get in the way. She had learned that lesson the hard way. But one night, after an exhausting board meeting, she found herself heading toward the rooftop. A place no one else went at night. A place where she could breathe. She wasn't alone. Nate was already there, leaning against the railing, looking out at the city. "Didn't peg you as the rooftop type," he said without turning around. "I could say the same about you." He finally looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Why are you here, Sylvia?" The way he said her name made something tighten in her chest. She should have walked away, should have ignored whatever this was. Instead, she stepped closer. "I don't know," she admitted. Nate exhaled, shaking his head with a knowing smirk. "That's dangerous." She swallowed. "I know." They stood there, side by side, on the edge of something neither of them could define. Neither of them said it. But that night, under the city lights, they both knew. This wasn't just a habit anymore. This was something more. Sylvia was not easily rattled. She had faced boardroom battles, cutthroat negotiations, and the relentless demands of being the youngest CFO of Titan Corp. Yet, nothing prepared her for the message that appeared on her phone that morning. "Sylvia, we need to talk. I made a mistake. Call me, Stephen." For a full minute, she stared at the screen, her grip tightening around her phone. Stephen Cole, her ex, the man who had betrayed her. She had buried him in the past, locked away the pain, the humiliation, the rage. He was supposed to be a closed chapter, so why, after all these years, was he suddenly trying to come back? She deleted the message. She had nothing to say to him. But Stephen was never one to be ignored. Later that day, as she exited a meeting, she spotted him in the Titan Corp lobby. He stood there in an expensive suit, the same arrogance in his eyes, the same confidence in his smirk. But he wasn't the same. The man who had once dismissed her as a stepping stone was now looking at her like he regretted everything. Sylvia kept her face unreadable. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "You shouldn't be here," she said coolly, stopping a few feet away. "Sylvia, I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, already turning away. He grabbed her wrist. A mistake. She ripped her arm away, her glare sharp enough to cut. "Touch me again, and I'll have security throw you out." Stephen exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Damn it, Sylvia. Just hear me out. I know I messed up. I was young, stupid, ambitious." "Stop." Her voice was low, but lethal. "You didn't betray me because you were young. You did it because you're selfish, because you thought I was just another step on your way to the top." Stephen flinched. "Good. Sylvia, Move on, Stephen. I did." She turned and walked away, head high, heels clicking against the polished floor, and she didn't look back. That night, as Sylvia left the office, she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She scanned the parking lot, her pulse quickening. Nothing seemed out of place. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. She wasn't the type to get paranoid, but tonight, something felt different. Pulling out her phone, she called her driver. "Miss Peterson? Change of plans. Pick me up at the back entrance." She wasn't taking chances. As she turned toward the back exit, a shadow moved nearby. A familiar voice called out, "Leaving so soon?" Her heart clenched. Stephen. He stepped out of the shadows, hands in his pockets, looking far too comfortable for a man who had just been dismissed. Sylvia kept her face cold. "Are you following me now?" "Not at all," he said smoothly. "Just waiting for another chance to explain myself." "There is no other chance." Stephen sighed. "Sylvia, do you really think that whatever you're doing with that janitor is real?" Her blood ran cold. He knew. She kept her expression blank. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Stephen smirked. "Come on, Sylvia. I know everything that happens in this company. People talk. They've seen you and him. Late nights, little conversations." She clenched her fists. Who was watching her? Stephen leaned closer. "You're the CFO, Sylvia. The company's future. And yet you're entertaining some nobody in the janitorial department? Do you really think that's a good look?" She held his gaze, refusing to let him see the storm brewing inside her. "Who I talk to is none of your business," she said sharply. "But it is, because I still care about you." Sylvia laughed, a bitter, cutting sound. "You don't care about me, Stephen. You care about control." He exhaled heavily. "Sylvia, you belong with someone who understands your world, someone like me." Her lip curled in disgust. "You mean someone like you, the man who threw me aside the moment something better came along?" Stephen's jaw tensed. For once, he had no response. Sylvia turned away. "Don't contact me again." This time, he didn't stop her. That night, Sylvia was on edge. Stephen's sudden return. The way he had dug into her personal life. The feeling of being watched. Was it all coincidence, or was something bigger at play? Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Be careful, Sylvia. Not everyone is who they seem to be." A chill ran down her spine. She had spent years building walls to protect herself. But tonight, those walls felt dangerously fragile. And for the first time in a long time, she was afraid. Sylvia wasn't the type to be easily shaken. Yet, after Stephen's sudden reappearance and the mysterious message warning her to be careful, something didn't sit right. She had always prided herself on being in control, on knowing everything about the people in her orbit. But Nate was different. Despite how much time they had spent together, she realized she knew very little about him. Who exactly was he? Her fingers hovered over her keyboard. It wouldn't take much to dig into his records. One simple search in the company database, and she would have all the answers she wanted. But something stopped her. Wouldn't that be a betrayal of trust? Instead, she closed the laptop and grabbed her purse. She would find out the truth the right way. The next morning, Sylvia waited for Nate by the staff break room. She had questions, and she wanted answers. When he finally walked in, wearing his usual work uniform, his sleeves casually rolled up, Sylvia felt an odd mix of emotions: curiosity, doubt, something deeper she refused to name. "Morning, CFO," he greeted with a smirk, grabbing a cup of coffee. She crossed her arms. "I need to talk to you." "Sounds serious," he mused, taking a sip of his coffee. "It is," she replied, voice firm. "Who are you, Nate?" His smirk faded. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." Her eyes bore into his. "Why is my ex suddenly warning me about you, Matt? How do you, a janitor, have so much insight into business and finance? Why do I feel like there's something you're not telling me?" A long silence stretched between them. Then Nate sighed, setting his coffee cup down. "So you're finally asking." Sylvia's stomach twisted. "Finally?" He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I knew this day would come, just didn't think it'd be this soon." "Tell me the truth, Nate," she said softly. He studied her for a moment, as if debating how much to reveal. Then, finally, he spoke. "My full name is Nathaniel Carter Blackwood." The name hit her like a shockwave. Blackwood, as in Theodore Blackwood, the chairman of Titan Corp. Sylvia's breath caught. "You're lying," she whispered, shaking her head. Nathaniel smiled humorlessly. "I wish I was." She staggered back a step, her mind racing. It made sense now, the confidence, the intelligence, the way he carried himself. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "Because I wanted to know what it was like to be seen as just me." His voice was calm, but there was something raw beneath it. Not as a billionaire's heir, not as the guy who's expected to inherit the empire, just Nate. She stared at him, struggling to process it all. "But why? Why work as a janitor?" His jaw tensed. "Because I wanted to understand this company from the ground up. My father wanted me to take over someday, but I refused to walk into a position of power without knowing what it's like to work at the lowest level." Sylvia's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about him was wrong. "You lied to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer. "I never lied, Sylvia. I just didn't tell you everything." She let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "That's the same thing." He sighed. "I was going to tell you, I swear. But every time I tried, I realized how much I liked just being Nate with you. No titles, no expectations, just us." Sylvia wanted to be furious. She wanted to walk away. But instead, all she felt was betrayal and confusion. And worst of all, she was still in love with him. "You should have told me," she finally said, voice tight. "I know," he admitted, "but I don't regret meeting you this way." She met his gaze, searching for deception. She found none. Instead, she saw something else, something that scared her more than anything, a love that had never been about power or status, just them. "Sylvia," he said softly, taking a step forward, "I don't care about the company or the money or my father's expectations. I care about you." Her heart pounded. "You need time," Nate said, his voice gentle. "I get it, but I just need you to know. I meant every word, every moment we shared, and that's the only truth that matters." Sylvia swallowed hard, emotions warring inside her. She had spent years guarding her heart. Now she had to decide whether to trust him with it. And she wasn't sure if she was ready. Sylvia had always believed in logic, in facts. Emotions were secondary, things that could be controlled, managed, and if necessary, ignored. But now, standing in her office, staring out at the city skyline, she realized that love had never been something she could control. Nathaniel, Nate, had deceived her, yes, but not for the reasons she had feared. He wasn't a fraud. He wasn't using her. He was simply a man who wanted to be seen beyond his wealth. And the worst part? She understood that. Because she had spent years fighting to be more than just the poor, abandoned girl from nowhere. She sighed, closing her eyes. Could she forgive him? Could she trust that, despite everything, what they had was real? Before she could dwell on it further, her assistant Maya knocked hesitantly before stepping inside. "Ma'am, there's a situation," Maya said carefully. Sylvia turned, her posture straightening. "What is it?" Maya hesitated. "It's Stephen. He's in the lobby, causing a scene." Sylvia's expression darkened. She should have known Stephen wouldn't give up that easily. She grabbed her purse and marched out of her office. The moment she reached the lobby, she saw Stephen standing there, looking every bit the entitled, smirking man she had once loved. "You're really going to keep ignoring me, Sylvia," he called out. "I have nothing to say to you, Stephen." Her voice was calm, but ice cold. He scoffed, stepping closer. "Oh, but you should. You think that janitor is your future?" He chuckled mockingly. "You should thank me for telling you the truth about him. He was playing you, Sylvia, just like you thought." Sylvia's jaw clenched. "And yet, the only liar here is you," Stephen faltered, but quickly regained his smirk. "I just don't want you to make a mistake, Sylvia. You're better than some charity case pretending to be someone he's not." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't get to decide what I deserve." He sighed dramatically. "Look, I still love you." "Enough." A deep, familiar voice cut in. Sylvia turned just as Nate walked through the entrance. He wasn't in his janitor uniform today. Instead, he was in a tailored black suit, his presence commanding and effortlessly powerful. Stephen's face drained of color. "Blackwood," he choked out. Nate's gaze was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath it. "That's right," he said smoothly. "I assume you know who I am now?" Stephen looked between them, realization dawning. "You knew?" he asked Sylvia in disbelief. She lifted her chin. "Of course, I did." Stephen let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable. You turned me down for him?" Nate stepped forward, his tone even. "She didn't choose me because of my name. She chose me in spite of it." Stephen scoffed, but there was panic behind his arrogance now. "This isn't over," he muttered, before storming out. Sylvia exhaled slowly, turning to Nate. You didn't have to do that. Nate tilted his head. And let him talk to you like that? His eyes softened. Not a chance. She smiled, just a little. But she wasn't done with him yet. That night, Sylvia sat in her apartment, lost in thought. Everything had changed so fast. A month ago, she was just the CFO of Titan Corp, focused on numbers, efficiency, and protecting herself from another heartbreak. Now, she had love staring her in the face. A knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Nate stood there. No suit, no wealth, just him. Hey, he said, holding a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. Nate, I don't want to waste any more time, he interrupted gently. I love you, Sylvia. I loved you before you knew who I was, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. He slowly got down on one knee, flipping open the box to reveal a breathtaking diamond ring. Sylvia felt her entire world tilt. Will you marry me? Tears pricked her eyes. She had spent so long believing she wasn't meant for love that she was too broken to trust again. But now, looking at Nate, she realized something. She wasn't scared anymore. She smiled, her heart full for the first time in years. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. As he slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her softly, Sylvia knew this was her happily ever after. Months later, at a high-profile business gala, Sylvia walked arm in arm with Nate, now publicly known as the heir to Titan Corp. She had never been more respected, more powerful, more in control of her life. And across the room, Stephen stood in the shadows, watching. He had lost everything. His job, his reputation, and worst of all, the woman who had been his greatest prize. For the first time in his life, Stephen realized he had made the biggest mistake of all, but it was too late. Sylvia Blackwood had already won, and she wasn't looking back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more beautiful stories.